TSA agent humiliates black traveler, turns pale when FBI director steps forward. Marcus Washington had been through airport security countless times in his 15 years as a successful corporate attorney, but something about today felt different. Perhaps it was the way the TSA agent's eyes lingered on him a beat too long while barely glancing at the white passengers ahead of him. Or maybe it was the subtle shift in the agent's tone, professional with others, unnecessarily curt with him. Little did Marcus know that this routine business trip would expose ugly truths about power, prejudice, and justice in America, all because the wrong person was watching at exactly the right time. The fluorescent lights of Reagan National Airport buzzed overhead as Marcus approached the security checkpoint. He'd arrived early for his flight to Boston, where he was scheduled to finalize a major merger between two tech companies. The deal would cement his reputation at the firm and potentially position him for the partnership he'd been working toward since graduating from Harvard Law with honors. Marcus adjusted his navy Tom Ford suit and placed his carry-on luggage on the conveyor belt. Despite the early hour, the airport was crowded with business travelers and tourists, all shuffling forward in the security line with the resigned patience of modern air travelers. "Next," called a TSA agent with a buzz cut and a perpetual scowl. His name tag read, Officer Randall Jenkins. Marcus stepped forward, offering his ID and boarding pass with a polite smile. Officer Jenkins barely looked at Marcus's face before scrutinizing his identification with exaggerated care. "Where you headed today, sir?" he asked, emphasizing the honorific in a way that drained it of any respect. "Boston for business," Marcus answered evenly, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the uneasy feeling growing in his stomach. "Business, huh?" Jenkins's tone was skeptical. "And what kind of business would that be?" Marcus felt the eyes of other travelers on him. "I'm an attorney, corporate merger." Jenkins handed back the documents with barely concealed disdain. "Empty your pockets completely. Remove your belt, shoes, and any jewelry." "Of course," Marcus replied, following the standard procedure he'd done hundreds of times. He noticed the white businessman ahead of him hadn't been asked to remove his watch or belt. As Marcus placed his items in the gray bin, Jenkins called over another agent. "We're going to need a special screening on this one, Gary." The second agent nodded, eyeing Marcus with unwarranted suspicion. "Step aside, sir." Marcus felt heat rising to his face, but kept his voice level. "May I ask why I'm being selected for additional screening?" Jenkins's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Random selection, sir, nothing personal." But it felt personal, very personal, especially when Marcus noticed that none of the white passengers were being randomly selected. "Stand here with your arms out," instructed Gary, positioning Marcus where everyone could see him. A few feet away, a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit watched the scene unfold with growing interest. His keen gray eyes missed nothing as he observed Jenkins's smirk and Marcus's carefully maintained dignity. Marcus remained silent as the second agent conducted a pat-down that seemed more aggressive than necessary. "What's this?" Jenkins asked, holding up Marcus's custom Mont Blanc pen from the bin. "It's a pen," Marcus answered, struggling to keep his tone neutral. "Looks like it could be used as a weapon to me," Jenkins remarked, turning the pen over in his hands. "It's a writing instrument that cost more than your weekly salary," Marcus thought but didn't say. Instead, he replied, "It's just a fountain pen. I use it to sign legal documents." Jenkins smirked. "We'll need to check this separately." As they continued to search through his belongings with unnecessary thoroughness, Marcus noticed the middle-aged white man moving closer, his expression darkening. "Is there a problem here, Officer Jenkins?" The stranger's voice carried a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. Jenkins looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "This is a security matter, sir. Please stand back." The man didn't move. Instead, he reached into his pocket and produced an identification card. "I believe I asked you a question, officer." Jenkins glanced at the ID and visibly paled. The badge identified the man as Director Thomas Caldwell of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Director Caldwell," Jenkins stammered, his previously confident demeanor evaporating. No problem at all, sir, just routine screening. Caldwell's steel-gray eyes narrowed. Is that so? Because from where I was standing, it looked like harassment. The airport seemed to go quiet, though Marcus knew it was just his focus narrowing to this unexpected confrontation. Sir, we have protocols, Jenkins began. I'm intimately familiar with TSA protocols, Caldwell interrupted. In fact, I helped develop many of them. What I'm seeing here doesn't align with those protocols. Marcus stood quietly, uncertain how to react to this unexpected intervention. Caldwell turned to him. Sir, I apologize for this treatment. May I ask your name? Marcus Washington, he answered, extending his hand. Corporate attorney with Benson, Wyatt, and Miller. Caldwell shook his hand firmly. Thomas Caldwell, I'd like to speak with you after you've collected your belongings if you have a moment. Jenkins and Gary hurriedly returned Marcus's possessions, their earlier suspicion replaced by nervous deference. Thank you, officers, Marcus said with deliberate politeness as he put on his shoes and belt. The small act of dignity felt like a victory. As he walked away from the checkpoint with Caldwell beside him, Marcus felt the eyes of everyone in the security area on them. That happens often, Caldwell asked quietly. Marcus adjusted his tie. Often enough that I build extra time into my schedule for random screenings. Caldwell nodded, his expression grim. I'd like to buy you a coffee, Mr. Washington, if you have the time. I think we should talk. This chance encounter in an airport would change both men's lives forever, though neither could have predicted how their paths would continue to cross, or how the ripple effects would touch the highest corridors of power in Washington and beyond. In the airport cafe, away from the watchful eyes of Jenkins and the other TSA agents, Marcus and Caldwell sat across from each other, steam rising from their untouched coffees. I wish I could say what you experienced was uncommon, Caldwell said, his deep voice tinged with regret. But we both know better. Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm cup. With all due respect, Director, why did you step in? Most people, especially people in positions of power, just look away. Caldwell's eyes, weathered by decades of service, met Marcus's directly. My father was one of the first black FBI agents recruited under J. Edgar Hoover. He faced discrimination daily, both from suspects and his fellow agents. He paused. I learned early that looking away only empowers the wrong people. The unexpected personal disclosure took Marcus by surprise. I didn't realize. That I might understand, Caldwell smiled slightly. My mother is white. I've lived my life between worlds, Mr. Washington, sometimes invisible in both, sometimes suspect in both. Call me Marcus, please. Then I'm Thomas, the FBI director countered. For the next 20 minutes, they talked about their experiences, Marcus as a black attorney in a predominantly white field, and Thomas as a biracial man who had risen through the ranks of federal law enforcement. Their conversation flowed easily, finding common ground in uncommon lives. I should let you get to your flight, Thomas finally said, checking his watch. But I'd like to follow up on what happened back there. Jenkins's behavior was unacceptable. Marcus hesitated. I appreciate the thought, but making waves could create problems for me. Every time I fly, I'll be flagged. You already are, Thomas replied bluntly. But not for the reasons you think. Your name shares similarities with a suspected financial criminal. The system flags you, but any competent agent would see immediately that you're not the person of interest. You're joking, Marcus said flatly. I wish I were. The system needs fixing, and people like Jenkins need accountability. Thomas pulled out a business card. This has my direct line. I'd like to hear from you, especially if you experience anything like this again. Marcus accepted the card, turning it over in his fingers. Why me? This happens to people who look like me every day. Because change requires specific examples, not just statistics. And because I have a feeling about you, Marcus Washington. Thomas stood, extending his hand. Safe travels to Boston. As they parted ways, neither man realized they were being watched by a third party. A young woman with intense eyes and a TSA uniform who had observed the entire interaction from a discreet distance. Alicia Rodriguez had worked for the TSA for 3 years and had witnessed Jenkins's behavior toward minorities countless times. She documented incidents, filed reports, and been systematically ignored by her supervisors. Seeing the FBI director intervene gave her hope that perhaps someone would finally listen. What she didn't know was that Jenkins had powerful friends protecting him, friends who wouldn't appreciate the FBI director taking an interest in his activities. Activities that extended far beyond racial profiling at a security checkpoint. Marcus boarded his flight to Boston with Thomas Caldwell's card in his wallet and an unexpected alliance forming in his mind. The merger in Boston suddenly seemed less significant compared to the conversation he'd just had. As the plane taxied down the runway, Marcus gazed out the window at the Washington Monument in the distance, its white marble gleaming in the morning sun. Something had shifted in his worldview. For years, he'd played by the rules, kept his head down, worked twice as hard as his white colleagues. He'd believed that success would insulate him from the indignities faced by other black Americans. Today had proven him wrong, but it had also shown him that allies could appear in unexpected places. Little did he know that back at Reagan National, Officer Jenkins was making a phone call to a burner phone, his voice low and urgent. "We have a problem. Caldwell saw everything, and he's talking to the lawyer." The voice on the other end was calm but chilling. "Then we have two problems to solve, don't we? Keep an eye on Rodriguez. She's been watching you too long. We'll handle Caldwell and the lawyer." The chess pieces were moving, and Marcus had just unwittingly stepped onto a board where the stakes were life and death. In Boston, the merger negotiations proceeded smoothly. Marcus's preparation was impeccable, his arguments persuasive, his demeanor unflappable. By the end of the day, both companies had signed the preliminary paperwork, and the clients were celebrating what would soon be a billion-dollar deal. "You were magnificent in there, Marcus," said Elizabeth Chen, a fellow attorney from his firm who had accompanied him to Boston. "I thought Harrison from the other side was going to have a stroke when you pulled out those market projections." Marcus smiled, loosening his tie as they walked through the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel where they were staying. "Harrison always thinks he's the smartest person in the room. Sometimes he needs a reminder that he's not." Elizabeth laughed, her long black hair swinging as she shook her head. "Speaking of which, dinner with the clients at 8. Harrison and his team will be there too." "I'll be ready," Marcus assured her, heading toward the elevator. Once in his suite, Marcus kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the king-sized bed, the adrenaline of the successful negotiation finally wearing off. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the merger. The news is already breaking on financial sites. We should talk when you're back in D.C. Thomas Caldwell." Marcus sat up, surprised. How did Caldwell know about the merger? It hadn't been public knowledge. And how did he get his personal cell number? Before he could contemplate further, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his sister's name. "Maya," he answered warmly. "How's my favorite law professor?" "Busy," Maya Washington replied. At 35, she was 2 years younger than Marcus and taught constitutional law at Georgetown. "But I'm calling about you. A student of mine interning at the ACLU mentioned your name came up in a meeting today." Marcus frowned. Why would the ACLU be discussing me? Apparently, there was an incident at Reagan National this morning with a TSA agent. "How the hell do they know about that already?" Marcus demanded, sitting up straight. "Marcus, there are videos," Maya said gently. "Someone recorded the whole thing on their phone. It's not viral yet, but it's circulating in civil rights circles." Marcus closed his eyes, processing this information. "Great, just what I need right now." "The ACLU wants to talk to you," Maya continued. "They've been building a case against TSA profiling for years. Your incident could be significant, especially with the FBI director's involvement." "I didn't ask for any of this, Maya." "I know," she said softly, "but maybe it found you for a reason." After hanging up, Marcus stood at the window overlooking Boston Harbor, watching the lights of boats moving through the darkening water. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Successful, well-dressed, respected in his field. And still, to Officer Jenkins, just another black man to be humiliated and controlled. His phone buzzed again, another text from Caldwell. "Be careful who you trust, Marcus. Some people want this story to disappear. Others want to use it, and you, for their own agenda. Marcus's unease grew. What had he stumbled into? If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I appreciate every one of you joining me for these real-life drama stories. Dinner with the clients was a blur of expensive wine, perfectly cooked steaks, and corporate small talk. Marcus played his role flawlessly, but his mind kept drifting to the cryptic texts from Caldwell and his sister's revelation. As the evening wound down, Elizabeth pulled him aside. "You're distracted tonight, everything okay?" Marcus trusted Elizabeth. They'd worked together for 5 years and had a solid professional relationship. Still, Caldwell's warning echoed in his mind, "Be careful who you trust." "Just tired," he deflected. "It's been a long day." Elizabeth studied him, her dark eyes shrewd. "Well, whatever's on your mind, don't let Harrison notice. He's been watching you like a hawk all night." Marcus glanced across the private dining room where Harrison Weber, the opposing counsel, was deep in conversation with the CEO of his client company. As if sensing Marcus's gaze, Harrison looked up, his smile not reaching his eyes as he raised his glass in a mock toast. Back in his hotel room, Marcus loosened his tie and opened his laptop. He hesitated only briefly before typing TSA Racial Profiling Reagan National into the search bar. The video appeared immediately among the top results. Someone had captured the entire interaction with Jenkins, the additional screening, and Caldwell's intervention. The footage had been posted on multiple social media platforms and already had thousands of views. The comment section was a battlefield of opinions. "This happens to black folks every day. The only reason anyone cares is because an FBI big shot stepped in. Maybe if he wasn't dressed so nice they wouldn't have been suspicious. Profiling works for a reason. I go through Reagan National weekly and have never been treated like this. This is pure racism. If the FBI director is involved, there's more to this story than we're seeing." That last comment gave Marcus pause. Was there more to the story? Why had Caldwell been at the airport in the first place? And why was he taking such a personal interest in what happened? A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Checking the peephole, he was surprised to see Elizabeth standing in the hallway. "Sorry to disturb you," she said when he opened the door, "but there's something you should know." Marcus let her in, noting the troubled expression on her normally composed face. "I just got a call from Diane," she said, referring to one of the senior partners at their firm. "The video of your airport incident has reached the partners. They're concerned about potential fallout." "Fallout?" Marcus repeated incredulously. "I was the victim in that situation." Elizabeth held up her hands. "I know that, but you know how the firm is about publicity of any kind. Diane wanted me to gauge how you're planning to handle it." Marcus felt a flare of anger. "How I'm planning to handle being racially profiled and humiliated in public. That's seriously what they're worried about." "They're worried about clients' reactions," Elizabeth clarified, her voice gentle but firm. "Right or wrong, that's always their first concern." Marcus paced the room, his mind racing. "The client we just landed is about to bring in millions in legal fees. If the firm is more concerned about a video where I did nothing wrong than they are about my dignity as a human being, maybe I need to reconsider my future there." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "Don't make any rash decisions, Marcus. The partnership committee votes next month and you're the frontrunner." "Am I? Or am I just the token diverse candidate they can parade in front of clients to show how progressive they are?" The words hung in the air between them. Elizabeth didn't respond immediately, which told Marcus everything he needed to know. "I should go," she finally said. "Early flight tomorrow." After she left, Marcus returned to his laptop, but now searched for Thomas Caldwell. The results painted a picture of a career FBI agent who had risen through the ranks over 30 years, respected by colleagues and feared by criminals. His appointment as director 2 years ago had been controversial, with some questioning whether a biracial man could effectively lead the bureau, despite his impeccable credentials. Marcus was about to close his laptop when an email notification appeared. The sender's address was encrypted, but the subject line caught his attention. "Jenkins is not who you think he is." His finger hovered over the delete button, suspecting a phishing attempt, but curiosity won out. The email contained only a single line of text. Meet me at the Boston Common near the bandstand. 7 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone. A friend from the TSA. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. It could be a trap. It could be nothing. But something in his gut told him this was important. He set his alarm for 6 a.m., knowing sleep would be elusive tonight. Dawn broke over Boston with a chill mist rising from the harbor. Marcus dressed casually in jeans and a Harvard sweatshirt, hoping to blend in with the early morning joggers in the park. His flight back to D.C. wasn't until afternoon, giving him time for this mysterious meeting. Boston Common was quiet at this hour, with only a few dedicated runners and dog walkers traversing its paths. Marcus walked briskly toward the bandstand, his senses alert for anything unusual. A woman in a navy peacoat sat on a bench near the bandstand, a takeout coffee cup in her gloved hands. As Marcus approached, she looked up, her dark eyes assessing him quickly. "Mr. Washington," she said, not a question but a confirmation. "You have me at a disadvantage," Marcus replied, remaining standing. "My name is Alicia Rodriguez. I'm a TSA officer at Reagan National." She gestured to the space beside her on the bench. "Please sit. I don't have much time." Marcus sat, maintaining some distance between them. "You sent the email." Alicia nodded, glancing around the park. "I'm taking a significant risk contacting you. There are people who would not be happy about this conversation." "Why take the risk then?" "Because what happened to you wasn't an isolated incident. Officer Jenkins has a pattern of targeting minorities, especially successful-looking black men. I've been documenting it for months." Marcus studied her face, trying to determine her motives. "Why would you do that?" Alicia's expression hardened. "My brother was deported 2 years ago after a random screening by Jenkins turned into an immigration investigation, despite the fact that he had legal status. Jenkins claimed he saw something suspicious. The truth is, he saw a Latino man and decided he didn't belong here." "I'm sorry about your brother," Marcus said sincerely. "But I still don't understand why you're telling me this or how you knew I'd be in Boston." "I overheard your destination when you were at the checkpoint," she explained. "As for why, Director Caldwell's involvement changes everything. Jenkins has been protected by higher-ups until now, but an FBI director, that's a different level of scrutiny." "Protected by whom?" Alicia leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Jenkins isn't just a bigot with a badge. He's connected to a network of officers across multiple agencies who use their positions to harass minorities, but also to facilitate something much worse." "Which is?" "Human trafficking," she whispered. "They identify vulnerable travelers, usually undocumented immigrants or people with complicated visa situations, and funnel them to handlers who promise to help with their problems. Many disappear into forced labor or sex trafficking operations." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "That's a serious accusation." "I have evidence," Alicia insisted. "Not enough for a conviction, but enough to warrant an investigation. I've tried reporting through official channels, but my complaints disappear or get buried." "Why not go to the media?" "And say what? That I, a junior TSA officer, am accusing a superior of involvement in human trafficking based on patterns I've observed. Without concrete proof, I'd be fired before the story aired and nothing would change." Her eyes met his directly. "But you're different. You're a respected attorney with connections, and now you have the ear of the FBI director." Marcus shook his head. "I barely know Caldwell. We had one conversation." "He gave you his card, didn't he? His personal number?" Marcus didn't answer, which Alicia took as confirmation. "He's been watching Jenkins too," she continued. "But from a distance, your incident gives him a direct reason to intervene." "So you want me to what? Be the face of some crusade against the TSA?" Alicia's expression softened slightly. "I want justice for my brother, for the people who have disappeared, and yes, for people like you who are humiliated daily just because of how they look." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small USB drive. "This has everything I've gathered over the past year. Names, dates, patterns, connections. I'm trusting you with this because I think you'll do the right thing with it." Marcus stared at the drive but didn't take it. Why not give this directly to Caldwell? Because I don't know if I can trust him either, Alicia admitted. The corruption goes deep, Mr. Washington, very deep. Before Marcus could respond, Alicia's phone buzzed. She checked it and stood abruptly. I have to go. My flight leaves in an hour. She placed the USB drive on the bench between them. The choice is yours, but remember you're already involved whether you want to be or not. She walked away quickly, disappearing into the morning mist that still clung to the trees. Marcus sat motionless for several minutes, staring at the small device that potentially contained explosive information. Finally, he picked up the drive and slipped it into his pocket, his mind racing with the implications of Alicia's claims. If what she said was true, this went far beyond racial profiling at airports. It was systematic corruption using bigotry as a cover for something even more sinister. As he walked back toward his hotel, Marcus's phone rang. The screen showed unknown caller. Hello, he answered cautiously. Mr. Washington. The voice was unfamiliar male with a slight southern accent. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance in Officer Jenkins. Marcus stopped walking, his body tensing. Who is this? Let's just say I'm someone who understands how things work in Washington. I understand you've been meeting with people who have been spreading some rather troubling accusations. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus replied evenly, his legal training kicking in. The man chuckled. Come now, Mr. Washington, we both know that's not true. That USB drive in your pocket could cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. Important people. Marcus's blood ran cold. They knew about the drive, which meant they'd been watching him, watching Alicia. What do you want? He asked, scanning the park for potential observers. Be reasonable. You're on track for partnership at a prestigious firm. You have a bright future ahead of you. Why jeopardize that by getting involved in matters that don't concern you? Racism and potential human trafficking don't concern me. Alleged human trafficking, the man corrected. Allegations without proof are just slander, Mr. Washington. As an attorney, you should understand that better than most. Is that a threat? Not at all. It's an opportunity to make a wise choice. The drive, Mr. Washington, it doesn't belong to you. Return it, move on with your successful life, and this unpleasantness will be forgotten. Marcus's mind raced. Return it to whom? There's a trash can to your left about 20 feet ahead. Drop the drive there and walk away, that's all. Marcus spotted the trash can, and beyond it a man reading a newspaper on a bench, his face obscured but his posture alertly still. And if I refuse? The man's voice hardened. Then perhaps Officer Jenkins was right to flag you for additional screening. Perhaps there is something suspicious about you after all, something that might warrant a deeper investigation into your background, your clients, your finances. A pause. Your sister's position at Georgetown is quite prestigious, isn't it? Tenure track, I believe. It would be a shame if something were to derail that. The threat to Maya crystallized Marcus's resolve. I need to think about this. Don't think too long, Mr. Washington. My associates are not patient people. The line went dead. Marcus stood frozen, the USB drive feeling like it weighed 100 pounds in his pocket. He was being watched, threatened, and possibly followed. And now his sister had been dragged into it as well. He needed help, but who could he trust? The firm was more concerned about optics than justice. The TSA had already proven corrupt at some level, and Caldwell, Marcus still wasn't sure where the FBI director stood in all this. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Caldwell. Don't trust the hotel Wi-Fi. Don't plug in any devices you've received. Meet me at the JFK Presidential Library in 1 hour. Come alone. Marcus stared at the message, wondering how Caldwell knew about the USB drive. Was he having Marcus followed as well? Or was he monitoring Alicia? Either way, it confirmed that this situation was far more complex than a simple case of airport profiling. He flagged down a taxi, deliberately passing the trash can without approaching it. The man on the bench folded his newspaper and stood, speaking quietly into what appeared to be a Bluetooth earpiece. The chess game had begun in earnest, and Marcus was just starting to recognize the pieces on the board. The John F. Kennedy Presidential Library stood on Columbia Point, its striking white concrete and glass structure overlooking Boston Harbor. Marcus paid the taxi driver and entered the building, purchasing an admission ticket to blend in with the regular visitors. He wandered through exhibits chronicling Kennedy's life and presidency, his mind far from the historical displays surrounding him. Every few minutes, he scanned the rooms for Caldwell or for anyone who might be following him. "The Cuban Missile Crisis exhibit is particularly good," said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to find Thomas Caldwell standing there, dressed casually in khakis and a dark blue sweater, looking like any other museum visitor. "How did you know about the USB drive?" Marcus asked without preamble. Caldwell gestured toward a quieter corner of the exhibit. "Alicia Rodriguez has been working with us for the past 6 months. She's a confidential informant in an ongoing FBI investigation." Marcus absorbed this information, his legal mind quickly connecting dots. "So yesterday at the airport, that wasn't a coincidence. You were there because of Jenkins." "I was there because of the network Jenkins is part of," Caldwell corrected. "What we didn't anticipate was that you would become directly involved." "I didn't ask to be involved," Marcus pointed out. "Few people do," Caldwell acknowledged, "but here we are." Marcus lowered his voice. "I received a threatening phone call this morning. They knew about the drive, knew exactly where I was. They threatened my sister." Caldwell's expression darkened. "That's a significant escalation." "They're watching me right now, aren't they?" "Probably," Caldwell admitted, "but so are my people." Marcus felt a flare of anger. "So I'm what? Bait? A pawn in some larger game between the FBI and this network?" "No," Caldwell said firmly. "You're a victim of circumstances who now has a choice to make. You can walk away, we'll ensure your safety and your sister's, or you can help us bring down a trafficking network that has operated with impunity for years." "By doing what exactly?" "By being exactly who you are. A brilliant attorney with a legitimate grievance against a TSA officer who racially profiled you. Someone who might reasonably file a complaint, might reasonably speak to civil rights organizations about your experience." "While secretly working with the FBI," Marcus added, understanding dawning. "You want me to be the public face of this while you work behind the scenes." Caldwell didn't deny it. "Your involvement provides cover for our continuing investigation. They'll be focused on discrediting you, threatening you, maybe even bribing you. Meanwhile, we follow the money, track the communications, and build our case against the entire network." "That's a lot to ask of someone who was just trying to catch a flight to Boston yesterday morning." "It is," Caldwell agreed. "And I wouldn't ask if there were a better option, but your profile is perfect, successful, respected, with resources and connections. They can't easily dismiss you or make you disappear." "They threaten to investigate me, my finances, my clients." "Let them try," Caldwell said with quiet confidence. "I've already had a team look into your background. You're clean, Marcus, squeaky clean. The worst they'll find is a speeding ticket from law school and some questionable music choices on your streaming services." Despite the tension, Marcus smiled slightly at the unexpected humor. "You investigated me. The moment Jenkins flagged you, your name went into the system. I make it a point to know who's being targeted at Reagan National. It's a key entry point for their operation." Marcus considered his options, turning the USB drive over in his pocket. "What's on this drive that has them so worried?" "Names, dates, patterns of behavior. Alicia is very thorough, but the most damaging is what happened to her brother. He wasn't just deported, he disappeared entirely. No record of him entering his home country, no trace in any system. It's as if he ceased to exist after Jenkins pulled him aside for additional screening." Marcus felt sick, and this has been happening under everyone's noses at one of the most secured airports in the country. "Not everyone is looking," Caldwell replied grimly. "Some are deliberately looking away." "How high does this go?" Caldwell's expression was unreadable. "That's what we're trying to determine." A family with young children moved closer to examine the exhibit near them, effectively ending their private conversation. "I need time to think," Marcus said quietly. "You have until your flight this afternoon," Caldwell responded. "If you decide to help us, don't use the drive. We already have copies of everything on it. Just go about your business as usual, but expect to be approached again." "And if I decide to walk away?" Then give me the drive now and we'll make sure you and your sister are protected. You'll never hear from me again. Caldwell paused. But Marcus, people are suffering. People who don't have your resources or connections. People like Alicia's brother. With that, Caldwell moved away, seamlessly joining a tour group heading to another part of the museum. Marcus remained by the Cuban Missile Crisis exhibit, staring at a replica of the war room but seeing instead the faces of those who had crossed his path in the last 24 hours. Jenkins with his contemptuous smirk, Alicia with her determined eyes, Caldwell with his measured words and hidden agenda. And behind them all, nameless, faceless victims caught in a web of corruption that used racism as both tool and cover. His phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Partners want to meet tomorrow morning about the airport situation. What's your plan?" Another piece moving on the chessboard. Marcus realized he'd never responded to the firm's concerns. Now they were mobilizing, worried about their reputation, their clients, their bottom line. The irony wasn't lost on him. Throughout his career, he'd represented corporations in similar situations. Damage control, risk management, cost-benefit analysis of doing the right thing versus doing the profitable thing. Now he was on the other side, a potential liability to be managed. His phone buzzed again. Maya this time. "The ACLU lawyer is insistent about talking to you, says it's important, call me." Marcus put the phone away and walked toward the museum's vast glass wall overlooking the harbor. The water stretched before him, sunlight dancing on its surface, boats moving purposefully along their routes. Life continuing as normal while he stood at a crossroads. He thought about his parents, his father, the first in his family to attend college, who had instilled in Marcus and Maya a deep belief in education as the path to equality. His mother, who had marched with King and taught her children that dignity was non-negotiable. What would they expect of him now? As Marcus watched the boats on the harbor, he made his decision. He would not be intimidated. He would not look away. He would use his privilege, his education, his connections to fight a system that he had benefited from but that crushed so many others. He took out his phone and texted Caldwell, "I'm in, what's the next step?" The response came almost immediately. "Go about your day normally, return to DC, expect contact from the ACLU, accept their help but share nothing about our conversations, we'll be in touch." Marcus put his phone away and left the museum, his path now clear before him. He didn't notice the woman taking photos of the harbor who subtly captured his image as he passed, nor the man in the gift shop who spoke quietly into his sleeve as Marcus exited the building. The game was in motion, the players were set, and Marcus Washington had just volunteered to step into the center of the board. The flight back to DC was uneventful, though Marcus found himself studying his fellow passengers with new awareness. How many of them had experienced what he had? How many had been singled out, humiliated, threatened? And how many had simply disappeared into a system designed to exploit the vulnerable? Elizabeth sat beside him, reviewing documents for their next case, occasionally glancing at him with concern. "You're quiet today," she observed as the plane began its descent into Reagan National. "Just thinking about tomorrow's meeting with the partners," he replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. "They're just covering their bases," Elizabeth assured him. "The firm knows your value." Marcus nodded, but remained silent. His value to the firm was becoming increasingly clear to him, and it had little to do with his legal brilliance and everything to do with the diversity he represented in their promotional materials. As they disembarked, Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. They would have to pass through the same security area where he'd encountered Jenkins just a day earlier. Would the officer be there? Would he recognize Marcus? To his relief, Jenkins was nowhere to be seen as they exited the secure area. But Marcus did notice an increased security presence throughout the terminal. More uniformed TSA agents, more plainclothes individuals with the alert posture of law enforcement. "Seems like a lot of security today," Elizabeth commented, noticing it too. "Maybe they're expecting someone important," Marcus suggested, wondering if Caldwell had stationed additional agents in the airport. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus spotted Alicia Rodriguez at the TSA desk, apparently going about her normal duties. Their eyes met briefly, but she gave no sign of recognition, turning back to her computer screen as if he were just another passenger. Outside, Marcus hailed a taxi while Elizabeth waited for her husband to pick her up. "See you tomorrow morning," she said as they parted. "Try to get some rest. The partners will want you at your best." The ride to his Georgetown townhouse gave Marcus time to gather his thoughts. He needed to prepare for multiple scenarios. The meeting with the partners, potential contact from the ACLU, another approach from whoever had threatened him in Boston, and whatever next steps Caldwell had in mind. As the taxi pulled up to his address, Marcus noticed a sleek black car parked across the street, its windows tinted. A warning prickle ran up his spine, but he paid the driver and approached his front door with deliberate casualness, key in hand. Before he could insert it into the lock, the door opened. Maya stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Thank God you're home," she said, pulling him inside and quickly closing the door. "We need to talk." Marcus set down his luggage in the foyer, taking in his sister's disheveled appearance. Maya was normally impeccably put together, but today her hair was hastily pulled back, her clothes wrinkled as if she'd been wearing them too long. "What's going on?" he asked, concerned. "Someone broke into my apartment last night," she said without preamble. "They took my laptop but nothing else. Not my jewelry, not my tablet, just my work laptop." Marcus felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "Did you call the police?" "Of course," Maya replied, pacing the hardwood floor of his living room. "They took a report but didn't seem particularly concerned. Just another DC burglary." "What was on the laptop?" "Everything, my class notes, research, personal emails." She stopped pacing and faced him directly. "Marcus, I had emails about you, about the airport incident. The ACLU lawyer had sent me some documents to pass along to you." Marcus guided her to the sofa and sat beside her. "Maya, I need to tell you something, but I need your absolute discretion." He explained about his meetings with Caldwell and Alicia, careful to share only what was necessary. He told her about the threats, about the USB drive, about the larger investigation into trafficking. With each revelation, Maya's eyes widened further. "Marcus, this is huge," she finally said when he finished. "And dangerous. These people already know about me, know where I live. They've already taken my property." "I know," Marcus acknowledged, guilt weighing heavily on him. "That's why I wanted to be honest with you. You deserve to know what you've been dragged into." Maya was silent for a long moment, processing everything. Then she straightened her shoulders, her expression hardening with resolve. "So what's the plan?" "Plan," Marcus repeated, surprised. "Yes, the plan," Maya insisted. "You're working with the FBI to expose corruption and human trafficking. I'm already involved whether I want to be or not. So what's our next step?" Marcus couldn't help but smile at his sister's determination. "Caldwell wants me to proceed normally, meet with the ACLU, file an official complaint against Jenkins. Meanwhile, he and his team will use that as cover for their larger investigation. That's it, just business as usual while people are being threatened and possibly disappeared." Maya's tone was incredulous. "What else can we do? We're lawyers, not law enforcement." Maya stood and walked to the window, carefully peering out through the blinds at the black car still parked across the street. "We're more than just lawyers, Marcus. We have resources, connections, knowledge of how the system works. And most importantly, we have privilege, the kind that makes it harder for us to simply disappear." She turned back to face him. "The ACLU lawyer who contacted me is named Jordan Ellis. He's brilliant, dedicated, and has been building a class action against the TSA for years. Your case could be the linchpin he needs." "Caldwell warned me not to share anything about the FBI investigation with the ACLU," Marcus reminded her. "And I understand why," Maya acknowledged. "But that doesn't mean we can't work with Ellis on the civil rights aspect. In fact, a public civil case might provide even better cover for Caldwell's criminal investigation." Marcus considered this angle. A two-pronged approach. The ACLU attacks from the civil side, the FBI from the criminal side. "Exactly," Maya agreed, her academic mind clearly mapping out the strategy. "We force them to fight on multiple fronts, which increases the chances they'll make mistakes." "Or get desperate," Marcus cautioned, "which could make them more dangerous." Maya's expression softened slightly. I know it's risky, but Marcus, how many people have already been hurt by this network? How many more will be if no one stands up to them? Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made the sender clear. Meeting with partners tomorrow. Firm prepared to offer immediate partnership plus significant bonus if you sign NDA regarding the airport incident and decline any involvement with civil rights organizations. Consider carefully. DM. DM, Diane Mercer, the senior partner who had contacted Elizabeth in Boston. The firm was trying to buy his silence. He showed the text to Maya, whose expression darkened. They're trying to bribe you with the partnership you've already earned. It's a standard corporate approach, Marcus said, his voice neutral but his disappointment evident. Identify the problem, calculate its cost, solve it in the most economically efficient manner. And what about the human cost? Maya demanded. What about justice? Marcus set his phone down on the coffee table, suddenly exhausted. Justice is a luxury, Maya. You know that as well as I do. Our whole legal system is designed to provide more justice to those who can afford it. That doesn't make it right. No, Marcus agreed. It doesn't. He was quiet for a moment, then added, but it does make it unsurprising that the firm would try to resolve this with money rather than moral courage. Maya sat beside him again, taking his hand in hers. What are you going to do? Marcus looked at their joined hands, two black professionals who had done everything right, worked twice as hard, followed all the rules, achieved success by any conventional measure. And yet here they were, still vulnerable to the same systemic racism that had followed their ancestors for generations, just in more sophisticated packaging. I'm going to do what Dad would have done, he said finally. What Mom would expect, I'm going to fight. Maya squeezed his hand. We're going to fight, she corrected, together. Outside in the black car, a man with cold eyes watched the Washington siblings through a high-powered lens, documenting their conversation through the windows. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told him enough. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Sir, it appears our offer has not had the desired effect. Washington and his sister appear to be strategizing. The voice that responded was cultured, authoritative. Then we move to the next phase. Contact our people at the firm. It's time to apply more direct pressure. And the sister? A pause. Let's see how tomorrow plays out. We may need additional leverage. The man ended the call and continued his surveillance, unaware that 3 houses down, in an unmarked van, FBI agents were conducting their own surveillance, not just of the Washington residents, but of him as well. The chess game had multiple dimensions now, with players watched by watchers who were themselves being watched. And at the center of it all, Marcus Washington prepared for a meeting that would determine not just his professional future, but potentially the futures of countless unnamed victims caught in a web of corruption that reached further than he could imagine. Morning arrived with sharp clarity, sunlight streaming through the windows of Marcus's townhouse. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with scenarios and strategies, but as he dressed in his best suit, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, crisp white shirt, deep blue tie, he felt a strange calm settle over him. Maya had stayed the night in his guest room, uncomfortable with returning to her compromised apartment. She sat at his kitchen island now, nursing a cup of coffee and reviewing notes on her tablet. I spoke with Jordan Ellis this morning, she said as Marcus entered the kitchen. He's eager to meet with you. I told him you'd call after your meeting with the partners. Marcus nodded, pouring himself coffee. Any sign of our friends outside? The black car left around midnight. A different one arrived at 5 a.m. They're not even trying to be subtle. They want us to know we're being watched, Marcus reasoned. It's part of the intimidation tactic. His phone buzzed with a text from Caldwell. Meeting at your firm is being monitored. Say nothing about our arrangement. We have assets in place. The cryptic message sent a fresh wave of unease through Marcus. Assets in place. What did that mean? Had Caldwell somehow planted agents within his law firm? You ready for this? Maya asked, studying his face. As ready as I'll ever be, Marcus replied, checking his watch. The car service should be here in 10 minutes. Remember, Maya said, standing to straighten his already perfect tie, you hold the moral high ground here. They need you more than you need them. Marcus smiled at his sister's unwavering support. I'll remember. The ride to the Benson, Wyatt, and Miller offices in downtown D.C. was tense but uneventful. The firm occupied the top 5 floors of a glass and steel tower with views of the Capitol Dome, a physical manifestation of its power and influence in the city. As Marcus stepped into the lobby, he noticed Elizabeth waiting by the elevators, her expression troubled. She hurried over to him. Marcus, thank God you're early, she said quietly. Something strange is happening. What do you mean? Elizabeth glanced around the busy lobby before continuing. Diane has assembled not just the executive committee, but representatives from our biggest clients. Harrison is here too. Marcus frowned. Harrison Weber, the opposing counsel from Boston, why would he be at an internal meeting about me? That's just it, Elizabeth said, her voice dropping further. I don't think this is just about the airport incident anymore. There's something else going on. The elevator arrived, and they stepped in along with several other employees. Conversation ceased as they ascended to the 42nd floor where the firm's most sensitive meetings were held. Whatever happens in there, Elizabeth whispered as they neared their floor, know that I'm on your side. Marcus gave her a grateful nod as the doors opened onto the executive level. The receptionist greeted them with practiced professionalism. Mr. Washington, Ms. Chen, they're waiting for you in the founder's room. The founder's room was the firm's most impressive conference space, reserved for closing major deals or entertaining important clients. The fact that they'd chosen this venue for what should have been a discreet internal matter confirmed Elizabeth's suspicions that something bigger was afoot. As they entered, Marcus took in the scene with a lawyer's trained observation. Seated around the massive mahogany table were the 7 members of the executive committee, including Diane Mercer at the head. Along one side sat representatives from 3 of the firm's largest clients, multinational corporations that collectively generated over $100 million in annual billing. And there, at the far end, sat Harrison Weber, looking smug and completely out of place at an internal meeting of a competing firm. Marcus, Elizabeth, thank you for joining us, Diane said, her voice professionally pleasant but her eyes calculating. Please take a seat. Marcus chose a chair directly across from Harrison, whose smirk widened slightly at the direct confrontation. I'm curious why opposing counsel is present at what I was told would be an internal firm meeting, Marcus said, addressing Diane but keeping his eyes on Harrison. Diane cleared her throat. Mr. Weber is here representing certain interests that have a stake in the discussion we're about to have. What interests would those be? Harrison leaned forward. I represent a consortium of security contractors who work closely with federal agencies, including the TSA. Your performance at Reagan National has created concerns among my clients. Marcus maintained his composure, though inwardly his mind was racing. Security contractors with connections to the TSA. More pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. My performance, Marcus repeated. You mean when I was racially profiled and subjected to humiliating additional screening without cause? One of the corporate clients shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Diane interjected smoothly. Marcus, we've asked you here today because the firm is concerned about potential conflicts of interest and reputational risks. What conflicts of interest? Harrison answered before Diane could. Your sister's involvement with the ACLU creates a direct conflict with the interests of several clients represented by this firm. Marcus felt a flash of anger but kept his voice level. My sister is a constitutional law professor who occasionally consults for civil rights organizations. That creates no conflict with my corporate practice. It does when you're planning to become the poster child for a class action lawsuit against federal security agencies that contract with our clients, Harrison countered. So that was it. The consortium Harrison represented was part of the network Caldwell was investigating. They were using the firm as leverage to pressure Marcus into silence. I wasn't aware that being a victim of discrimination made me a poster child, Marcus replied coolly. Nor was I aware that this firm's commitment to diversity and inclusion had exceptions when clients might be uncomfortable. Diane's expression hardened. Marcus, no one is questioning the firm's commitment to diversity. We're simply trying to manage a potentially damaging situation with discretion. Discretion, Marcus repeated. Is that what we're calling it now when we ask black employees to quietly accept discrimination to protect white comfort? A tense silence fell over the room. One of the corporate clients, the CEO of a technology company that had been vocal about its commitment to racial justice, looked particularly disturbed by the direction of the conversation. Perhaps we should be direct, Harrison suggested, his tone condescending. The firm is prepared to offer you immediate partnership, a significant bonus, and a guaranteed client portfolio if you sign an NDA regarding the airport incident and issue a statement that the matter was a simple misunderstanding. And if I refuse? Harrison and Diane exchanged glances. It was Diane who answered, her voice regretful but firm. Then the partnership committee would need to reevaluate your candidacy in light of the potential client conflicts and public relations concerns. You're threatening my partnership if I don't agree to cover up racist behavior by a federal officer, Marcus stated plainly. We're asking you to consider the welfare of the firm and its 800 employees, Diane countered. One incident, however unfortunate, shouldn't derail your career or harm the firm. Marcus looked around the table, taking note of who met his eyes and who looked away. He noticed Elizabeth's barely contained anger, the discomfort of some committee members, the calculated assessment of others. Before I respond, Marcus said carefully, I'd like to hear from our clients directly. Is supporting the silencing of discrimination complaints part of your corporate values as well? The CEO, who had appeared uncomfortable, spoke first. Absolutely not. My company has been outspoken about our commitment to racial equity. We wouldn't expect any employee to remain silent about discrimination. Harrison cut in before others could speak. This isn't about discrimination. It's about national security protocols being mischaracterized by someone with an agenda. And what agenda would that be? Marcus asked directly. Your sister's connections to activist groups, your own ambitions. Perhaps a desire for publicity that would raise your profile beyond this firm. Marcus had to suppress a laugh at the absurdity of the accusation. I've given 8 years of my life to this firm, billing more hours than anyone at this table. I've brought in major clients, won impossible cases, and mentored every diverse associate we've hired. And you think I engineered being humiliated at an airport checkpoint as some kind of career move? Harrison's expression tightened, but before he could respond, the door to the conference room opened. A male clerk entered, carrying a large envelope. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said nervously, but this was marked urgent for this meeting. He placed the envelope in front of Diane and quickly exited. Diane opened it with a puzzled expression that quickly morphed into shock as she read the contents. What is it? One of the committee members asked. Diane looked up, her face pale. It's a federal subpoena for all the firm's records relating to Harrison Weber's clients in the security contracting sector, and a separate subpoena for Mr. Weber himself. All eyes turned to Harrison, whose smug confidence had vanished, replaced by barely controlled panic. This is absurd, he sputtered. Some kind of intimidation tactic. The subpoena is signed by a federal judge, Diane noted, scanning the document. And it references an ongoing investigation into corruption, civil rights violations, and human trafficking. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. The corporate clients began gathering their things, clearly wanting distance from whatever was unfolding. I think we should adjourn this meeting, said the CEO who had spoken earlier. And for the record, my company would never support suppressing reports of discrimination. I'm disturbed this was even suggested. Marcus remained seated as the room began to clear, watching Harrison's desperate attempts to reassure the fleeing clients. Caldwell's assets in place had made their move, perfectly timed to disrupt the attempt to pressure Marcus into silence. Elizabeth leaned close to him. Did you know this was coming? Not specifically, Marcus answered honestly, but I had a feeling the meeting wasn't going to go as they planned. As the last client left, Harrison turned to Marcus, his expression now openly hostile. "You've made a serious mistake, Washington. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I think I'm beginning to," Marcus replied calmly. Harrison stormed out, followed by most of the committee members who suddenly had urgent matters to attend to elsewhere. Soon only Diane, Elizabeth, and Marcus remained in the massive conference room. Diane stared at the subpoena, her legal mind already calculating the implications. "Marcus, what have you gotten involved in?" "I didn't get involved in anything," he corrected her. "I was dragged into it when I was targeted for being black in an airport. Everything that's happened since has been the consequence of other people's actions, not mine." Diane nodded slowly, a new respect evident in her expression. "The partnership committee will meet this afternoon in light of recent developments. I believe they'll be eager to expedite your promotion." "To buy my loyalty after you were ready to discard me?" Marcus asked, keeping his tone professional despite his anger. "To recognize talent and principle when we see it," Diane countered smoothly. "The firm made a mistake today, one I personally regret, but good lawyers know when to change strategy when new evidence emerges." Marcus stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "I'll need the rest of the day off, family matters to attend to." "Of course," Diane agreed quickly. "Take whatever time you need." As Marcus and Elizabeth walked out, he could almost feel the shift in how the firm perceived him, from potential liability to someone with unexpected power and connections. "Whatever you're involved in," Elizabeth said quietly as they waited for the elevator. "Be careful, Marcus. People like Harrison don't make threats lightly." "I know," Marcus replied. "That's why what happens next is so important." His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Jordan Ellis is ready to meet. Coffee shop on K Street in 30 minutes. The next phase was beginning. The civil rights attorney, the FBI investigation, the exposed trafficking network, all converging with Marcus at the center. As he stepped into the elevator, Marcus felt both the weight of responsibility and the strange lightness of purpose. For years, he had navigated systems built to exclude people who looked like him, carefully playing by rules designed for others' advantage. Now he was helping rewrite those rules entirely. The pieces were in motion, the players exposed, and somewhere in the shadows, Officer Jenkins and his powerful friends were realizing that their days of operating with impunity were numbered. Jordan Ellis was not what Marcus had expected. From Maya's description of the brilliant ACLU attorney, he had imagined someone older, perhaps a veteran civil rights warrior from an earlier generation. Instead, the man who rose to greet them at the corner table of the busy K Street Cafe was barely 30, with a neatly trimmed beard and intense eyes behind stylish glasses. "Mr. Washington," Ellis said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Please call me Marcus," he replied, taking the offered hand. "And thank you for meeting on such short notice." "Your sister has been laying the groundwork for months," Ellis said, nodding respectfully to Maya. "Your case could be exactly what we need to break through the wall of immunity the TSA has been hiding behind." They sat, and Ellis immediately opened his laptop, revealing a desktop cluttered with folders labeled with dates and case numbers. "For the past 3 years, I've been documenting patterns of discriminatory treatment by TSA agents at major airports across the country," Ellis explained, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Racial profiling, religious profiling, harassment of transgender travelers. We have hundreds of complaints, but many victims are reluctant to pursue formal action." "Fear of retaliation," Marcus guessed. "Precisely," Ellis confirmed. "Most travelers just want to get where they're going. They don't want to be flagged in the system, subjected to additional screenings every time they fly. The power imbalance is extreme. TSA can effectively make your travel life a nightmare with a few keystrokes." "But my case is different," Marcus surmised. Ellis nodded. "You have resources, professional standing, and most importantly, an unimpeachable witness in Director Caldwell." Marcus kept his expression neutral at the mention of Caldwell, remembering the FBI director's warning not to reveal their arrangement. "The video of your incident has already been viewed over 2 million times," Ellis continued. Public sentiment is overwhelmingly supportive of you and critical of the TSA. I wasn't aware the video had spread that widely, Marcus admitted. It's become a rallying point, Maya explained. Black professionals especially are sharing it with their own TSA stories. Ellis pulled up the video on his laptop, and Marcus watched himself being subjected to Jenkins's additional screening from an outside perspective for the first time. The racial dynamics were even more obvious than he'd realized in the moment. Jenkins's contemptuous expression, the contrast in how other travelers were treated, Caldwell's authoritative intervention. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked as the video ended. "A two-pronged approach," Ellis replied. "First, an individual complaint against Officer Jenkins and Reagan National for clear violations of your civil rights. Second, your case becomes a centerpiece in our larger class action challenging the TSA's screening practices nationwide." Maya leaned forward. The class action has been building for years, but Marcus's case brings something new, indisputable evidence and a high-profile witness. Marcus considered this, thinking about Caldwell's concurrent criminal investigation. The civil approach would create exactly the kind of public pressure and distraction that would help the FBI's more secretive work. "What would this require from me?" he asked. "Public testimony," Ellis said honestly. "Depositions, possible court appearances, your willingness to become, for a time at least, the face of this issue. And the risks." Ellis didn't sugarcoat it. Backlash from those who support racial profiling under the guise of security. Potential retaliation from within the TSA system. Scrutiny of every aspect of your life by those looking to discredit you. "Some of that has already begun," Marcus noted, thinking of the meeting at the firm and Harrison's threats. "I'm not surprised," Ellis said grimly. "The TSA contracts with numerous private security firms that have powerful lobbying arms and connections throughout Washington." This aligned with what Caldwell had told him about the network Jenkins was part of, though Ellis seemed unaware of the human trafficking component. "There's something else you should know," Marcus said carefully. "The firm offered me immediate partnership if I would sign an NDA and drop the matter. When I refused, they implied my partnership would be in jeopardy." Ellis's eyes widened. "That's textbook retaliation. We could add them to the lawsuit." "That won't be necessary," Marcus replied. "Shortly after the threats were made, federal subpoenas arrived targeting the security contractors who were pressuring the firm. The partnership offer was reinstated rather quickly after that." Ellis looked impressed. "You have some serious allies, Marcus." "I'm learning that justice occasionally has good timing," Marcus said, careful not to reveal Caldwell's involvement. Their conversation was interrupted by the cafe door opening with enough force to draw attention. Alicia Rodriguez entered, her TSA uniform partially concealed under a light jacket, her expression tense as she scanned the room. When she spotted their table, she hurried over, sliding into the empty chair beside Ellis without invitation. "We have a problem," she said without preamble, her voice low and urgent. "Jenkins is missing." "Missing," Marcus repeated. "He didn't show for his shift yesterday or today," Alicia explained. "His apartment is empty, cleaned out. It's like he vanished." Ellis looked confused. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Alicia Rodriguez, TSA officer at Reagan National," she replied quickly. "I've been documenting Jenkins's behavior for months." "She's been helping me," Marcus added, careful not to mention Caldwell or the FBI. "This isn't good," Alicia continued. "When people connected to Jenkins disappear, they really disappear, like my brother." Ellis's confusion deepened. "Your brother?" "We don't have time for the full explanation," Maya interjected. "The point is, Jenkins fleeing suggests he knows something is happening. The question is, what does this mean for Marcus?" "It means they're regrouping," Alicia said grimly. "Cutting loose liability, covering tracks. Jenkins is just a foot soldier. The people behind him are the real threat, and they're smart enough to distance themselves from anyone who becomes a liability." Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Checking it discreetly, he saw another text from Caldwell. "Need to meet immediately. Security compromised. Don't trust regular channels. Come to the Jefferson Memorial in 1 hour. Alone." The urgency of the message sent a chill through him. Something significant had changed in the investigation. "I need to step out," Marcus said, rising from the table. "Ellis, Maya will fill you in on what we know so far. I have another meeting that can't wait." Ellis looked like he wanted to object, but Maya placed a hand on his arm. "Trust me, Jordan, this is important." As Marcus left the cafe, he felt eyes on him from across the street. A man in a parked car quickly looked away when Marcus glanced in his direction. The surveillance was becoming more obvious, less concerned with concealment. That wasn't a good sign. It meant they were getting desperate, or perhaps confident enough that secrecy no longer mattered. Either way, Marcus knew the danger was escalating. Jenkins's disappearance, Caldwell's urgent message, the increasingly bold surveillance. The chess game was moving into its final phases. As he hailed a taxi to the Jefferson Memorial, Marcus sent a quick text to Maya. "Be careful, stay with Ellis. I'll call when I can." The game had changed, and now the players were starting to vanish from the board. The Jefferson Memorial stood serene in the afternoon sunlight, its white marble dome gleaming against the blue sky. Tourists clustered around the base and wandered through the columned interior, taking photos of the bronze statue of the third president and reading his immortal words carved into the surrounding walls. Marcus climbed the steps, scanning the crowds for Caldwell. The FBI director had chosen a public place for their meeting, which suggested he was concerned about secure locations being compromised. He found Caldwell standing before Jefferson's statue, dressed casually in jeans and a windbreaker, looking for all the world like any other visitor. Only the alertness in his eyes and the subtle earpiece, partially concealed by his collar, hinted at his true identity. "Walk with me," Caldwell said quietly as Marcus approached. "We're being watched, but the crowds provide some cover." They descended the steps and began walking along the tidal basin, joining the stream of tourists enjoying the spring day. "Jenkins is gone," Marcus said once they were away from the densest crowds. "We know," Caldwell replied grimly. "But that's just the beginning. 3 of our informants in the trafficking network have gone dark in the last 24 hours. And early this morning, someone accessed our secure FBI database using credentials from a senior Homeland Security official." Marcus processed this information, understanding the implications. "They know about your investigation." "Worse," Caldwell said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They know who our informants are, including Alicia, and they're cleaning house." "Is Alicia in danger?" "Everyone connected to this is in danger now," Caldwell confirmed, "including you and your sister." They paused by the water's edge, appearing to any observer like 2 friends enjoying the view of the Washington Monument reflected in the basin. "How deep does this go?" Marcus asked, the question that had been nagging him since the beginning. Caldwell's expression was grim, all the way to the assistant secretary level at Homeland Security, possibly higher. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "So your own government colleagues are involved in human trafficking?" "A select few," Caldwell clarified, "using their positions to facilitate, conceal, and profit from a sophisticated trafficking operation that uses the TSA and border security as both cover and recruitment ground." "How do they get away with it?" "By targeting the most vulnerable travelers, undocumented immigrants, refugees, people with complicated visa situations. People who won't be missed, who have no power to fight back, whose disappearances won't make headlines." Caldwell's phone buzzed. He checked it quickly, his expression darkening further. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "They just raided Alicia's apartment." Caldwell put the phone away. "Fortunately, she wasn't there. We moved her to a safe house last night." "And my sister?" "We have agents watching her, but we need to move her too. And you?" Marcus shook his head. "I can't disappear, Thomas. I have the meeting with the partners tomorrow about my promotion. If I vanish now, it confirms their suspicions and undermines everything we're trying to do." Caldwell looked like he wanted to argue, but instead asked, "Did you meet with the ACLU lawyer?" "Yes, Ellis wants to pursue both an individual case against Jenkins and include me in a class action against the TSA's screening practices." "Good," Caldwell nodded. "The civil case will create public pressure and distraction while we continue our criminal investigation. But Marcus, you need to understand, these people are getting desperate. The subpoenas at your firm, Jenkins's disappearance, the database breach. They're feeling cornered. And cornered animals are the most dangerous, Marcus finished the thought. Exactly. Caldwell glanced around, his trained eyes scanning for watchers. I can't protect you openly without revealing our operation, but I've assigned a security detail that will maintain distance but stay close. What about Maya's? The same, Caldwell assured him. But you should both vary your routines, stay in public places as much as possible, and check in with each other regularly. They continued walking, circling back toward the memorial. There's something else you should know, Caldwell said after a moment of silence. The trafficking network isn't just about labor exploitation or sex work. Some of the people they target are being used for much darker purposes. What do you mean? Caldwell lowered his voice further. Intelligence gathering, blackmail, corporate espionage. They're identifying travelers with access to sensitive information or positions and using them to gather data that can be sold to the highest bidder, including foreign governments. The implications were staggering. So this isn't just a human rights issue, it's national security. That's why I've been able to pursue this investigation despite pressure from certain quarters to back off, Caldwell confirmed. The foreign intelligence angle gives me jurisdiction and leverage that a simple trafficking case wouldn't. As they approached the memorial steps again, Caldwell stopped. One last thing. Harrison Weber isn't just representing security contractors. He's actively involved in the operation, using his position as an attorney to facilitate communications and launder proceeds. That explains his presence at my firm meeting, Marcus realized, and his panic when the subpoenas arrived. We're closing in on them, Marcus. The subpoenas were just the first step, but the next 48 hours will be critical and dangerous. These people have too much to lose to simply surrender. Caldwell handed Marcus what appeared to be an ordinary business card. If you're in immediate danger, call this number. It's a direct line to my security team. Otherwise, continue as planned with the civil case and your firm business. Marcus pocketed the card. And Alicia, is she safe? As safe as we can make her, Caldwell replied, which wasn't entirely reassuring. They parted ways at the base of the memorial, Caldwell heading toward a nondescript sedan waiting at the curb, Marcus toward the metro station. As he walked, Marcus became acutely aware of the weight of responsibility he now carried. This had evolved far beyond his personal experience with airport profiling into something with national security implications, putting both himself and his sister at risk. Yet he felt more resolved than ever. The systems that had allowed Jenkins to target him were the same systems enabling the larger criminal enterprise, racism and xenophobia providing both motivation and cover for exploitation on a massive scale. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Ellis has begun drafting the complaints. Need to meet tonight to review. My place. Marcus replied quickly. Not your place. Security concerns. Meet at the firm. Conference room B, 8 p.m. The firm's security was top-notch, with cameras, guards, and controlled access. It would be safer than either of their homes tonight. As he entered the metro station, Marcus noticed a man in a dark suit following at a distance. One of Caldwell's people, he hoped, though he couldn't be certain. The lines between protector and threat had become dangerously blurred. The chess game continued, with Marcus now understanding that he wasn't just a pawn. He was a key piece whose movements could determine the outcome. The pressure was immense, but so was his determination to see this through to the end. For the first time in his legal career, Marcus felt he was truly fighting for justice, not just for favorable settlements or corporate interests. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and more meaningful than any merger or acquisition he'd ever handled. The stakes had never been higher, and the opponents never more dangerous. But Marcus Washington had been preparing for this fight his entire life, whether he'd known it or not. The firm's offices were mostly empty by 8 p.m., with only a few associates burning the midnight oil and the cleaning staff moving quietly through the corridors. Marcus had returned earlier to review case files and prepare for tomorrow's partnership meeting, keeping up appearances of normalcy despite the extraordinary circumstances. Conference Room B was smaller than the founder's room where the morning's confrontation had occurred, but it offered privacy and security, keycard access, no windows to the outside, and a location away from the main work areas. Maya arrived promptly at 8, accompanied by Jordan Ellis, both carrying bulging briefcases and grim expressions. "Any word from Alicia?" Maya asked as they settled around the conference table. "She's in a secure location," Marcus answered, not mentioning Caldwell or the FBI. "Her apartment was raided after we met at the cafe." Ellis looked alarmed. "Raided by whom?" "That's unclear," Marcus replied carefully, "but it suggests our opponents are getting nervous." "Or aggressive," Ellis countered. "I've been working civil rights cases for years, but I've never seen this level of reaction to a discrimination complaint." "That's because this goes beyond discrimination," Maya said, opening her laptop. "The TSA profiling is just the visible part of a much larger operation." Ellis looked between the siblings. "You know more than you're telling me." Marcus met his gaze directly. "There are aspects of this situation that I'm not at liberty to discuss. But I can tell you that pursuing the civil rights case is important not just for addressing discrimination, but for exposing systemic abuses within federal security agencies." Ellis studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Fair enough, but I hope you understand that, as your attorney, I can represent you most effectively when I have complete information." "You have everything you need for the civil case," Maya assured him. "The other matters are being handled through different channels." Ellis seemed to accept this, turning to his own laptop. "I've drafted the initial complaint against Officer Jenkins and Reagan National Airport. We'll need to file quickly before more evidence disappears." For the next 2 hours, they reviewed the complaint line by line, with Marcus providing additional details about his experience and Maya offering legal insights from her constitutional law background. Ellis proved to be meticulous and strategic, focusing on the strongest legal arguments while anticipating potential defenses. They were so absorbed in their work that none of them noticed the office lights flicker briefly around 10 p.m., or the momentary disruption in the building's electronic security system. In the security office on the ground floor, however, the guard monitoring the cameras did notice. He picked up his phone to call the building engineer, but before he could dial, the door to the security office opened. 2 men in maintenance uniforms entered. "Got a report of camera problems on the executive floor," one said casually. The guard frowned. "I didn't call that in." "Building management did," the second man replied, moving behind the guard's desk. "Mind if we check the system?" "I need to see ID first," the guard said, his hand moving toward the panic button under his desk. He never reached it. The first man's hand clamped over his mouth while the second delivered a precisely targeted injection to his neck. Within seconds, the guard slumped unconscious in his chair. "Camera feeds looped," the first man said, typing rapidly on the security console. "Elevator overrides engaged. We have 20 minutes before the system auto-resets." "Location?" the second man asked, pulling a weapon from under his uniform jacket. "Conference Room B, 42nd floor, 3 targets." Back in the conference room, the discussion had turned to potential media strategy. "The press conference should happen immediately after filing," Ellis was saying. "We need to control the narrative before." The lights went out, plunging the room into darkness before emergency lighting kicked in with a dull red glow. "Power outage," Maya wondered. Marcus's instinct screamed danger. "No, we need to move now." "What's going on?" Ellis asked, confusion evident in his voice. "No time to explain," Marcus said, gathering their materials quickly. "Follow me." He led them to the door but hesitated before opening it. The keycard reader that normally glowed green was dark. The electronic locks had failed. "Is there another way out?" Ellis asked, now catching Marcus's urgency. "The emergency stairs," Marcus replied, moving toward a door at the back of the conference room that led to a service corridor. As they hurried through the door, they heard the main conference room door being forced open behind them. "Run," Marcus urged, no longer bothering with pretense. They sprinted down the service corridor, the dim emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Marcus led them to the emergency stairwell, pushing through the door and starting down the concrete steps. 42 floors is a long way down. Maya gasped as they descended as quickly as they dared. We only need to get to the 30th, Marcus replied. There's a sky bridge to the adjacent building. The security systems are separate. They had descended about 5 floors when they heard the stairwell door above them crash open, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps. Keep going, Marcus urged, his hand going to his pocket where Caldwell's emergency contact card rested. But there was no time to make the call. The footsteps were gaining on them. In here, Marcus said suddenly, pushing through a door marked 38th floor legal library. The vast law library was dark except for the same emergency lighting, creating a labyrinth of shadows among the tall bookshelves. Hide, Marcus whispered. Split up, stay silent. They separated, each disappearing among the stacks of legal volumes. Marcus maneuvered to a position where he could see the door they'd entered through, pulling out his phone and sending a quick text to Caldwell's emergency number. Firm compromised. Armed intruders. 38th floor library. Help. The door burst open moments later. 2 men entered, weapons drawn, their movements suggesting professional training. They were no longer in maintenance uniforms, now dressed in tactical black, with earpieces and night vision equipment. Targets fled the stairwell at this level, one whispered into his comm device. Initiating search. Marcus watched as they methodically began sweeping the library, moving silently between the rows of books. Their efficiency was terrifying. These weren't ordinary security guards or even hired thugs. They moved like military or special operations personnel. From his hiding place behind a reference desk, Marcus could see Maya concealed 2 rows away, her face tense but composed. Ellis was somewhere on the other side of the library, out of Marcus's line of sight. One of the men moved closer to Maya's position. Marcus looked around desperately for some kind of distraction or weapon. His eyes fell on a heavy legal dictionary on the desk beside him. With careful movements, he lifted the massive book and threw it as far as he could toward the opposite end of the library. It crashed loudly against a shelf, sending volumes tumbling to the floor. Both men immediately turned toward the sound, moving away from Maya's position. Check it out, one ordered. I'll continue here. The diversion wouldn't last long. Marcus caught Maya's eye and signaled toward a door at the far end of the library marked Archives. She nodded in understanding. As the men split up to investigate the noise, Marcus sent another text to Caldwell. 2 armed individuals, military training, targeting us specifically. The response came seconds later. Federal agents en route, 5 minutes, stay hidden. 5 minutes might as well be 5 hours with trained killers methodically searching the library. Marcus needed another diversion, something bigger that would give them all time to reach the archive door. Inspiration struck as he remembered the library's fire suppression system. Unlike modern sprinklers, the old legal library had been granted an exemption to preserve the rare books, using a halon gas system instead of water. The manual activation panel was near the reference desk where he was hiding. Crawling carefully to the panel, Marcus used the light from his phone to examine the controls. It was simple: break the glass, pull the lever. But the alarm would immediately alert the intruders to his position. He needed coordination. Using the phone's flashlight in short, controlled bursts, he signaled to Maya, using the basic hand code they'd developed as children for silent communication during their parents' dinner parties. Fire alarm, run to archive when it sounds. Maya nodded, then used her own phone light to signal acknowledgement. Marcus hoped Ellis would understand what was happening when the alarm triggered. Taking a deep breath, Marcus smashed the glass with his elbow and pulled the lever. Immediately, klaxons blared throughout the floor. Red strobe lights began flashing, and a computerized voice announced, "Fire suppression system activated. You have 30 seconds to evacuate the area before halon release." The intruders shouted to each other over the noise, momentarily disoriented by the sudden cacophony. Marcus sprinted toward the archive door, seeing Maya doing the same. Ellis emerged from between the stacks, confusion on his face until he spotted the Washingtons running. "Freeze," one of the men shouted. recovering his composure and raising his weapon. A shot rang out, the bullet embedding itself in a shelf inches from Marcus's head. Books and paper fragments exploded around him. They reached the archive door as a second shot went wide. Marcus yanked it open, ushering Maya and Ellis through before following himself. The archive room was smaller than the main library, filled with boxes of old case files and records. More importantly, it had another door that led to a different stairwell, one used primarily by the records management staff. "This way," Marcus directed, leading them toward the second door. Behind them, the archive door burst open. One of the pursuers appeared, weapon raised. "Stop or I'll shoot." Ellis, who was closest to the door, made a split-second decision that would haunt Marcus forever. The young lawyer turned and charged the gunman, shouting for Marcus and Maya to run. The shot echoed in the confined space. Ellis jerked backward, blood blooming on his chest, before crumpling to the floor. "Ellis," Maya screamed, moving to help him. "Go," Ellis gasped, his voice weak but insistent. "The case, files, in my briefcase." Marcus grabbed Maya's arm, dragging her toward the secondary stairwell as the second intruder entered the archive room. "We can't leave him," Maya protested. "We have to," Marcus said grimly, pulling her through the door, "or his sacrifice means nothing." The last thing they saw before the door closed was Ellis lying on the archive room floor, his eyes open but dimming, as the two men stood over him. The service stairwell was narrow and poorly lit. Marcus and Maya descended as quickly as they dared, both fighting shock and horror at what they'd just witnessed. "Ellis," Maya's voice broke. "Later," Marcus said, his own voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We grieve later. Right now, we survive." They had descended only a few floors when they heard the service door above them crash open. Their pursuers were back on their trail. "We need to exit the stairwell," Marcus decided. "They'll catch us if we keep going down." At the next floor, they pushed through the door into an unfamiliar department, some kind of administrative space with cubicles and copy machines. The emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. Marcus led Maya through the maze of cubicles toward what he hoped was the main elevator bank. If Caldwell's people had indeed arrived, they would likely be coming up that way. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with a security guard making rounds. "What are you doing here?" the guard demanded, reaching for his radio. "The building's on partial lockdown due to a fire alarm." "Listen to me," Marcus said urgently. "There are armed intruders in the building. They've already killed someone. We need to evacuate immediately." The guard's skeptical expression vanished when the service door crashed open and one of the pursuers appeared, weapon raised. "Down," Marcus shouted, pulling both Maya and the guard to the floor as a shot rang out. The bullet shattered a nearby computer screen, sending glass and plastic fragments flying. The guard, now convinced of the danger, drew his own weapon, a standard issue pistol that seemed woefully inadequate against the attacker's military-grade equipment. "Stay down," the guard ordered, raising his pistol and firing 2 shots toward the intruder, forcing him back through the doorway. "We need to move," the guard said. "That won't hold them long." He led them toward the main corridor, using his radio to call for backup and report armed intruders. Whether his calls were reaching anyone was unclear. The building's communications might have been compromised along with the security systems. They reached the main elevator bank, but the guard shook his head. "Elevators are locked down during emergencies. We need the main stairs." As they moved toward the stairwell, a shout from behind made them turn. Both pursuers had caught up, weapons aimed. "No more running," one called. "Weapons down, hands up." The security guard raised his hands, but kept his body between the intruders and Marcus and Maya. "Gentlemen, I don't know what this is about, but—" He never finished the sentence. A single shot dropped him to the floor. Marcus and Maya stood frozen, hands raised, the reality of their situation becoming terrifyingly clear. These men had no qualms about killing witnesses, no hesitation about leaving bodies behind. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, playing for time, hoping that Caldwell's people would arrive before it was too late. The man who had shot the guard stepped forward, his face cold and professional. "That's not your concern. You should have accepted the partnership offer and kept your mouth shut, Washington. This is about more than airport profiling, isn't it? Marcus pressed, still trying to buy time. A flicker of surprise crossed the man's face. You figured out quite a bit, too much, in fact. Is that why Jenkins disappeared? Why Alicia's apartment was raided? The second man spoke into his comm device. We have the targets, proceeding to extraction. Extraction, not elimination. They wanted Marcus and Meyer alive, at least for now. That was something, though perhaps not much comfort considering what they might have planned afterward. Move, the first man ordered, gesturing with his weapon toward the service elevator at the end of the corridor. A freight elevator that wouldn't be affected by the emergency lockdown. As they were marched toward the elevator, Marcus heard the faint sound of the main stairwell door opening. His heart leapt with hope, but he kept his expression neutral, not wanting to alert their captors. The freight elevator doors opened, revealing a third man inside, also dressed in tactical gear. Change of plans, he said tersely. Building perimeter is compromised. Federal agents on multiple floors. We need to use the roof access. The first man swore under his breath, then pushed Marcus and Maya toward the now-open emergency stairs. Up, now. As they climbed, Marcus tried to catch Maya's eye, wanting to communicate some plan, some hope. But her expression was distant, shocked by the violence they'd witnessed. The roof access door required a key, which the third man produced from his pocket. Outside, the night air was cool and clear, the lights of Washington spread out before them like a carpet of stars. A helicopter sat on the building's helipad, rotors already beginning to turn. Inside, the first man ordered, shoving them toward the waiting aircraft. It was now or never. Once in that helicopter, their chances of rescue dropped to nearly zero. Marcus caught Maya's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. She blinked once in acknowledgement. As they approached the helicopter, Marcus stumbled deliberately, falling to his knees. The man behind him moved forward to haul him up, exactly as Marcus had hoped. In one fluid motion, Marcus twisted and drove his elbow up into the man's throat, a move he'd learned in the self-defense classes he'd taken after a racist encounter during his first year of law school. The man gagged and staggered backward, his weapon wavering. Maya seized the moment, driving her heel into the foot of the man guarding her, then twisting away as he cursed in pain. The third man raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the roof access door burst open. A flashbang grenade rolled across the helipad, followed by the distinctive shout of FBI, "Drop your weapons." What followed was chaos. The flashbang detonated, temporarily blinding everyone on the roof. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off the helicopter's metal frame. Marcus grabbed Maya and pulled her down, covering her body with his as federal agents swarmed onto the roof. The firefight was brief but intense. When Marcus dared to look up, two of their pursuers lay motionless on the helipad. The third was being handcuffed by agents in FBI tactical gear. The helicopter pilot, seeing the situation deteriorate, had increased power to the rotors, preparing to flee. A sniper's shot through the windshield ended that plan, and more agents converged on the aircraft. "Marcus, Maya," Caldwell's voice cut through the chaos. The FBI director hurried across the roof, his expression a mixture of relief and grim determination. "Ellis," Marcus said as Caldwell reached them. "They shot Ellis, archive room 38th floor." Caldwell spoke rapidly into his radio, ordering medical assistance and a search of the specified location. "Are you hurt?" he asked, looking them both over for injuries. "No," Marcus answered, helping Maya to her feet. She was shaking but composed, her natural resilience asserting itself. "What took you so long?" Caldwell's expression darkened. "Your attackers had helped disrupting building security. We had to fight our way through multiple levels of interference." He glanced at the helicopter. "They were well organized and well funded." "Who are they?" Maya asked, finding her voice. "That's what we're going to find out," Caldwell replied, nodding toward the captured man being led away. "But first, we need to get you both to a secure location." As they were escorted from the roof, Marcus looked back at the cityscape one last time. Somewhere out there, the masterminds behind this operation were learning that their extraction team had failed. The next move in this deadly chess game would be theirs. But for the first time, Marcus felt they had gained the advantage. The shadows were receding, the corruption being dragged into the light, and despite the terrible cost, justice seemed within reach. The safe house was a nondescript colonial in a quiet Virginia suburb, its ordinary appearance belying the extraordinary security measures in place. FBI agents patrolled the perimeter, and sophisticated surveillance equipment monitored every approach. Marcus sat in the living room, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, waiting for news about Ellis. Maya had finally fallen asleep in one of the bedrooms upstairs after hours of anxious pacing. Caldwell entered, his face showing the strain of the night's events despite his composed demeanor. "Ellis," Marcus asked immediately. "He's alive," Caldwell replied, and Marcus felt a surge of relief. "But in critical condition. The bullet missed his heart by centimeters. He's in surgery now at Walter Reed under heavy security." "Thank God," Marcus breathed. "And the security guard." Caldwell's expression answered before his words did. "He didn't make it. He leaves behind a wife and 2 children." Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of another death settling on his shoulders. "This is becoming too costly, Thomas." "I know," Caldwell acknowledged, taking a seat across from him. "But we've made significant progress tonight. The man we captured from the extraction team is talking." "Already, I would have expected a professional like that to hold out longer." "He's not talking because we broke him," Caldwell clarified. "He's talking because he realized he was being set up as the fall guy. The helicopter was rigged to explode in midair once they reached a certain altitude over the Potomac. Someone wanted to eliminate all witnesses, including the extraction team." The cold calculation behind such a plan was chilling. "So who is he? Who does he work for?" "Officially, he's employed by Sentinel Security Solutions, a private contractor that provides security personnel to various government agencies, including the TSA. Caldwell leaned forward. "Unofficially, he's former Special Forces who has been working as a problem solver for a shadow operation within Homeland Security." "How high does it go?" "We now have concrete evidence linking 3 assistant secretaries within DHS to the trafficking operation. And Harrison Weber was their legal facilitator, using his position to create shell companies, move money, and provide legal cover." Marcus processed this information. "What happens now?" "Dawn raids at multiple locations, arrests of key figures, and most importantly, the rescue of dozens of trafficking victims being held at various locations across the D.C. area." "And Jenkins?" Caldwell's expression hardened. "Found in the trunk of a car at Dull's long-term parking. He was eliminated as a liability once the operation started to unravel." Marcus wasn't surprised, but the news still landed heavily. Jenkins had been a bigot and a criminal, but his death represented another layer of corruption, the powerful sacrificing their pawns to protect themselves. "What about Alicia?" "She's safe," Caldwell assured him. "Her testimony will be crucial in the cases going forward." Marcus nodded, then asked the question that had been nagging at him. "And what about me and Maya? Where do we fit in now?" "You're key witnesses in what will become one of the most significant corruption cases in recent history," Caldwell replied. "But you're also still at risk. The 3 assistant secretaries we've identified aren't the only ones involved." "There are others higher up," Marcus surmised. "We believe so. People with enough power and influence to orchestrate multiple assassination attempts and access secure federal databases." "So we stay in protective custody indefinitely?" Maya's voice came from the doorway. She had entered silently, her face showing the strain of the past 24 hours, but her eyes clear and determined. "Not indefinitely," Caldwell said as she joined them. "But certainly until we've secured the primary actors in this conspiracy. A few days, perhaps a week." "And what about the civil case?" Maya asked. "With Ellis injured, who carries that forward?" "The ACLU has already assigned a senior legal team to take over," Caldwell informed them. "Your case is too important to lose momentum, especially now that it's connected to this larger scandal." Marcus shared a look with Maya, both recognizing that their lives had been irrevocably altered by what had begun as a simple act of discrimination at an airport checkpoint. "There's something else you should know," Caldwell added, his tone grave. "We found Ellis's briefcase in the archive room. It contained detailed records of over 200 cases of racial profiling at airports nationwide, including patterns that directly connect to missing persons reports." "He was closer to the truth than he realized," Maya said softly. "Much closer," Caldwell confirmed. "His research provides a roadmap that connects the dots between racial profiling as a selection tool and the subsequent trafficking of vulnerable individuals." The gravity of this revelation settled over the room. What had begun as a civil rights issue had expanded to expose a criminal enterprise reaching into the highest levels of government, using racism as both tool and cover for human trafficking on an industrial scale. "So what happens tomorrow?" Marcus asked, running a hand over his face. "Tomorrow the world changes," Caldwell replied simply. "The raids happen at dawn. By noon, the story breaks across every news outlet. By evening, congressional hearings will be announced. And in the coming weeks, a system that has operated in shadows for years will be dragged into the light." "And Jenkins," Maya asked, "does his story just disappear?" "No," Caldwell said firmly. "Jenkins becomes the entry point to the larger narrative, how racial profiling created the perfect cover for more sinister operations. His actions toward you, Marcus, become the thread that unraveled the entire tapestry." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the historical significance of what was unfolding. From a personal humiliation to a national scandal. "From an individual injustice to systemic reform," Caldwell corrected. "Your willingness to stand up, to not simply accept what happened as the way things are, has exposed corruption that might otherwise have continued for years." The conversation continued into the early hours, discussing details of the coming days, the security arrangements, the legal processes that would follow. But underneath the practical considerations ran a current of profound change in the systems that governed American security, in the Washington power structures, and in Marcus and Maya themselves. As dawn approached, bringing with it the coordinated raids that would shock the nation, Marcus stood at the window of the safe house, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue to the first hints of gold. Behind him, Maya and Caldwell continued their discussion, voices low but determined. Before him, a new day was beginning, one that would see justice served for Alicia's brother, for the unnamed victims of trafficking, for Ellis fighting for his life in surgery, and for every traveler who had faced humiliation and discrimination simply because of their race or origin. What had started with a TSA agent's sneer would end with the exposure of corruption at the highest levels. What had begun as one man's stand against discrimination would culminate in systemic change that could protect thousands. Marcus Washington, corporate attorney turned reluctant crusader, watched the sunrise with a mixture of exhaustion, determination, and hope. The chess game wasn't over. The highest-placed opponents remained in shadow, but the board had been irrevocably altered. And sometimes he reflected as the first full rays of sun broke over the horizon. That's how justice begins. Not with dramatic revolutions, but with one person refusing to accept injustice as inevitable. One person standing firm when it would be easier to look away. One person saying, "No more," even when powerful forces demand silence. The light grew stronger, pushing back the shadows of night, much as truth was now dispelling the darkness of corruption. A new day was dawning in Washington, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.